Hi, thanks
Good
for
morning,
joining me.
Faye. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so today we are just figuring it out. I don't have a podcast or anything, but I just was so inspired by our conversations that I wanted to share them with the world. So I really appreciate you kind of working through this with me today. And I will just kind of jump right in and introduce myself for anyone who doesn't know who I am. My name is Faye. So sometimes people call me Dr. Faye. I am a psychologist, and I'm also an EFM, or eligible family member, for those of you who don't know what that is. And that is something that Dee and I share. And we are out here in Vietnam, and trying to just figure things out. I run a private therapy practice, and that's mostly how I spend my time. Dee, can you share a little bit about you, and just to give a little bit of context for people?
Yes, sure. My name is Dee Harlow. I've been an EFM since 2009. In the same year, my twins were born, so my kids have been EFM since late 2009. And we've served in about 5 different countries during these past years. And so that's, I think, sort of a common thread that we all have together in this community. If you're outside this community, us EFMs meet a lot of people overseas, and so a lot of this could relate to you just living and traveling overseas too.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks, Dee. Yeah, so I'm just hoping to have a little bit of an existential conversation today. That word can sound a little bit scary to some folks, but it really just means it's just about our existence. And so I was at EFM Coffee with Dee one day, which is a common event that we do as guests come into town and things like that. And I just heard Dee, she wasn't even talking to me, but I heard this comment from her, and I was just fascinated. I just had to turn and look at her. And someone, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Dee, that someone was asking you like, oh, what are you doing? Right. And it's like our way of being like, are you working? Are you not? It's kind of like a
Yes,
veiled question that you get all the time. It's like,
yes.
And Dee responded with, I'm just being awesome. And I had to just stop everything I was doing and tune in. And can you just tell me about
Sure.
that response, Dee?
The response is really, I think, my initial response to a lot of things, which is to make it humorous um, for the person. And I've learned that unexpected things make people laugh
It's true.
before they start thinking about what it really means. But I was talking to someone myself in a situation in not too long ago. I wouldn't say it was 10 years ago. I'd say maybe in the past 5 years. And I was in a room with some good friends. And it was a good friend who suggested that I say this.
Mm.
So someone in the room asked me, so what do you do? And of course, I hesitate. And my friend sensed that I was fumbling, and she said, she's just being awesome. And I thought, what a great response.
Yeah. Well,
And so
go
I
ahead.
started saying that, and the more I say it, the more I believe it.
Hmm.
That I'm not just kidding. I think about my life and our lives and what we do to be in it for better or for worse
Mhm.
is amazing.
Mm.
And so it's very truthful.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that fumble, right? When you get the question, well, what do you do?
Yeah.
Why is there a fumble? Why is that so difficult?
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Well, because I think we all come with a complex past, and having been uprooted into a strange country
Mhm.
makes us unidentifiable in a way that's very concise.
Mhm.
Part of it is also, my immigrant background, um, and all of my career shifts, uh, all of my interest, being a mom. Like I'm so many different things and I'm doing all the things. And I guess the fumble is, what does this person want to hear? What is this
Mm.
person looking for? How are they categorizing that question? Do they want to know if I work? Do they want to know if I have a hobby? Do they want to know if I have kids? Like it's such an unspecific question, um, that I'm calculating in that pause.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I used to be an investment banker, but then I became a humanitarian worker, and then I worked overseas in several continents before my husband joined the Foreign Service, and now I'm trailing spouse.
Yeah, I mean, if we just had these little cards we could pass out to people, right, with our bullet pointed history. I think you bring up a really good point that that question is so imprecise. I have noticed in the last couple of years, I never even ask that question anymore. That is not a question I bring into my conversations because it is not what I want to hear. It's not what I want to know. And I think that I would love for one of my contributions to the world to be to stop people from asking that question. Like think about what is it you want to know about people and maybe ask those questions. And I think what I love so much about your response to that question is that it's so thoughtful, like that you have considered what people are coming to you with, this ambiguity, right? And in a humorous way, in an interesting way, you've interrupted the average flow, like the conversation
Yes.
that is like, oh, where are you guys going next? Where did you live before? Just the how long have you been here? Like all of the kind of conversations that don't really lead us into more intimate spaces or conversations. Um, and it just kind of like pulls you off of the script. And then people have an opportunity to maybe ask something that is more specific.
Yeah.
Or if you're feeling generous, you can jump in and kind of follow that up with something. Like it just depends, but I just love
Right.
how that interrupts the automatic nature. And I think that is what can really get us in trouble. I talk about values a lot and recentering our values. And one of the biggest points about that is how conscious that process is and how much energy it takes. And so, I kind of relate it back to that of living a conscious life, a life where you're really considering what you're doing and why, for what
Yes.
purposes.
Yes.
So you're saying yes. Is that something that connects with you, or what comes up for you when I say that?
Yes, it does come down to your values. I mean, we're just flowing with our conversation, but a lot of what I think about when someone asks me about foreign service life or life being an expat, because I've been an expat for a long time, and it comes down to remembering what your values are when you made those decisions.
Mm,
Because everything is a choice, even as a trailing spouse, we've made choices. And so I always go back to why we joined. And I say we because my husband has the job, but we joined the life.
mhm,
And I think it resonates a lot with, military spouses,
mhm,
because you do join a life and a lifestyle, um, where you have to detach from a lot
mhm,
and reattach yourself every time
mhm,
you move. And that same process is even within your moves as your friends leave and new friends come in and your job may change. As an EFM, there's this constant shifting. And so then because of that fluidity, I always go back to why did we? What are our values? What do
mhm.
we want to give? What do we want to get out of it? And where do we want to go?
Yeah, totally. I really identify with that. when I was deciding like, oh, am I really interested in this relationship with this person who's in foreign service?
Mm,
I had to really think about what would I be giving up to join, to pair my life with this person? What will I be getting out of it? Is that something that
mhm,
matches up with what's important for me and where I'm going?
mhm,
And so there's certainly, first, I think, especially as women, we may be socialized to kind of like give or sacrifice, or, we are, kind of seen as helpers, or, whatever it is. But it's so important to remember, like, our individual selves are first. We have to make peace first within ourselves before we can even come together with our partner and say, what are we doing as a couple or as a family unit, right? And so what in your individual journey, what kind of sticks out for you as important things that you thought about, or things that were, the values that you were looking at and exploring to say, is this the life I want to live? Do I want to keep being an expat? Do I want to join foreign service life? What were some things that helped you keep your values centered in that internal conversation?
mhm. I think it's not getting into the grass is greener on the other side trap. Um, I think when I decided to marry, um, it was a time when I thought a lot about lifelong decisions, right? I mean, you don't go through that process every day.
Mm,
And so I firmly believe in the choice that I made back then and those reasons why. Um, and then when we joined the Foreign Service together as a family, it was another juncture in my life where I really looked at my values, our values in a marriage, and our future together.
mhm,
And I try to not steer too far away from those decision making points in my life because they were given a lot of thought, a lot of feeling,
mm,
and there's a lot of truths in those moments. When the question comes up whether we should stay, we do go back to those moments a lot. Um, but we also really take stock of, how is the grass on the other side? How will
mhm,
that be?
mhm,
Um, the foundations that we've laid in this life is so strong, and there's so many benefits to it that we've only built on the values that we set a long time ago.
mm.
And when things get hard, you can forget. You
Yep.
can say, it's like the fight or flight, and you fight it, and you want to leave. But again, is the grass greener on the other side? What are you taking with you
Mhm.
um, if you were to make, a change out of the Foreign Service?
Yeah, and I know this word values can seem really vague for people. Can you give some examples of
Mhm,
either some of your personal values that you try to stay close to, and how you found those, how you stay close to those, or the family side, either one?
mhm. Yeah. In terms of my personal family, I had a lot of instability when I was younger. And so when I decided to get married, those values were about stability. It was about
Mhm.
being together and really sticking to that commitment of being together. And then when we started a family, um, it's the same thing. As long as we're together, we can do anything and we can get through anything.
Mm,
And all that, has been tested um, as we change and grow and age together. Um, so it's basically my value in the relationship
mm,
and in my life in the relationship rather than all the life outside because, we could be moving to another country, we could be settling down back in the United States, we could be settling down in a different country. But what does that mean?
mhm,
Um, uh, if it's not done in sort of due course, like let's say if we don't finish his career, into retirement. Um, Also, similarly, I value stability for my children. In the beginning of the Foreign Service career, you move every 2 years, and those 2 years go by so fast. And it's okay when they're young. I have found that stability is really highly valued as they get older.
Mm,
Um, and so maintaining stability for my children, if not, for my marriage, is also important. Um, and so we've sought longer assignments, we've sought extensions.
mhm.
Um, and so, the values of togetherness, commitment, and stability is what's currently guiding us. But I think it was also what we set from the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, you gave an excellent example right there. Like by centering stability and commitment and family, the one of the ways that you guys have done that as a family unit is to seek longer assignments and extensions to try and keep everyone in one place for a longer period of time.
Mhm.
What are other ways that you check in with your values? How do you, you talk about like coming back and coming back. How do you get back to those?
Um, it's gratitude.
Mm,
Uh, if that ties in at all. I have incredible gratitude, every day for what we do
mm,
have. And so I go back to being thankful for having had what we had. Um, for example, being in this career, my husband was able to come home every evening, and our evening dinners are our time together. It's
mm,
very rare that the four of us don't have dinners together. And, I mean that in the deepest respect, that um, uh, the Foreign Service job that he has been in have really given us the family stability of that routine, of that balance, of work life, that we may not have if, he was still in the corporate world, etc. And so I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I'm thankful for that all the time. I'm thankful, for the quality education that my children is getting in the private international schools. Um, and thankful for all the things. And
mm,
so I think sort of my gratitude bucket, when I can fill it like that, that gives me stability.
mm,
That gives me that stability that I'm striving for. There are all these things that we do have. Let all these positive things be the foundation of our lives now, to keep
mm.
it, going, and to thrive in it, not just survive. um,
Yeah, it sounds like that you are delighting in the examples of stability, right? Like if we're, that's one of your core values, you're remembering that in each day or as often as you can, right? We're not always able to stay in that super grateful place, and we all have hard times. But to say like, wow, we have this wonderful, time together every night, and that is so valuable to me, right? Values valuable. And to say like we are, if stability is our value, we've got this stability here. I think this is again living consciously, right? To not get in that automatic like, okay, yeah, guys, dinner's on the table, go eat, get back to your homework, but to slow down and have those dinners, then you are living in that stability, you're present in that stability. And so when maybe you're thinking about like what's next, right? It's always such a big decision. Which post is next? Do we stay in? Do we get out? All of those things. I imagine that your family, thinks back to, okay, well, we've been able to maintain stability here, and we really like, that we're all able to be home at this time, and this job affords that. That the education just makes sense that we're able to have some privilege there and gaining the private education. And so those things are working, those still align with our values. We've been able to stay in that place of alignment. And so that can really impact, staying in, getting out, and which posts. Like, how do we keep replicating this? Or maybe sometimes are there things that we can shift or can be different?
Yeah. 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 And that's tricky. You hit the nail on the head. How do we replicate this with every post? And people listening are probably thinking, what is she talking about stability? We're moving every 2 years, and in between we go back to DC, and then we have a month's home leave, every 2 to 3 years, and all of this, and it's constantly in flux. And I don't have an answer to that. I think, I seek stability where I'm at the time that I have. Um, and it's easier said than done. And, it's, how do you create that stability in new friendships? You don't. And if you don't at a post, then I look for stability in something else other than new friendships. I look to my old friends, and we're in a WhatsApp group, and we fantasize about meeting up with each other around the world, and so that becomes my stability if there are no new friends.
Yeah,
and the families, it's a cliche, but the family's always the stability, right?
Sure. Yeah. So I always think about this in the terms they used in my training was like the micro, meso, and macro systems that we're in, right? And we exist across all of these spectrums. And we have, first, again, ourselves, the individual, and then, our kind of family units and communities, and then the larger world. What are some things, if you can identify, this is such a strange question and I acknowledge that fully. What are some specific things that you have learned are helpful for you that help you stay connected at each of those levels and grounded in like what's important? Because I think that is also in my head, I'm relating that back to stability, right? That connection is stability, because connection is one of my core values. So I'm just kind of using my world to connect to yours. But yeah, can you name anything? You said you've got a WhatsApp group with some of your old friends, and it sounds like it may be a priority for you to try and make new friends at each post. But what are some things that you do across at the individual, family, and community levels that are helpful for you, that help you gain stability?
Yeah. At the individual level, I'm a naturally curious person. And I'd say I'm pretty outgoing, but I do need to sort of pull back and recharge as an extrovert. But because of that, I enjoy meeting people, um, and I enjoy finding that connection. Like, we have this life in common, yes, but what is beyond that? Is it our kids? Is it having a hobby, or trying to find a job, or bemoaning the heat, or really anything, but just making sure that I find something that I connect to with each person, and they may not become my best friend so fast, but I sort of vary how I connect with different people. I don't come with sort of a set mold, of a group of people that I'm looking for. It's like, well, who am I going to find? And I think I've learned that from the beauty of finding so many great people who are now my solid core friends. I've picked them up from Mexico, from Laos, from Lesotho, from DC. And so I know that people are out there. And if I can connect with more and find more wonderful people like I have in the past, then that's only going to add to my stable core going into the future. And from the community side, I think it just expands from meeting individuals to doing things, for the community. I think when we first arrive at post, at least in my experience, there's nothing but, you know, people wanting to be helpful, wanting to help. Do you
Mm,
need anything? Do you know about this? Do you want to go see this? Do you want to go see that? And I think that outreach has been great and has been really instilled in the Foreign Service culture. Um,
mhm,
and particularly among the EFM community who, may have the time, but also have the empathy of having been in the same spot to really reach out um,
mhm,
and take care of people. And so, once I'm settled, I shift my gears and I turn that around.
mm,
What does the community need? How can I help with what I know now? And these past years, under COVID, there have been a lot of needs,
mhm,
and so it fuels me to be helpful.
mhm.
um, and so I take that to sort of expand myself beyond the individuals that I meet and into communities, whether it's a local community or the expat community. Is, what do they need and how can I help them? And if someone asks for help, I'm pretty much there um,
Yeah. So I hear
for
you
them.
saying, sorry to interrupt. I hear you
Yeah.
saying so many pieces. So I want to kind of like summarize and kind of bullet point these. The first one was around making friends. And for me, I kind of think about this as an introvert with social skills, I like to say, about having the courage to reach out, the courage to like try and connect, because it's so hard to continuously connect in a lifestyle where we're picking up and moving all the time. So to make those efforts and to try to see who's out there, right? Like you were saying, your people are out there. Um,
Yeah.
and you're not going to find them unless you are having conversations that are kind of off the beaten path, and so maybe it's a bit about polishing up our skills for how do we have conversations that are actually interesting to us, that are fueling to us, that can give us back energy and help us get to know the person in front of us, not just like the mask that this person may be putting up because they're living their lives, or they're tired of having these conversations, or they get wary of making these connections. So, kind of putting in the work to gain new relationships, friendships sounds like is a big one. Um, Leaning into the inherent community that exists within the expat world, the foreign service world, that right when you arrive at such a critical time, to take advantage of these people who really do want to help you feel settled in,
Yes.
right? And I think people who have been doing this for any amount of time just know the benefit of helping someone get integrated into the community, to help people feel comfortable, to help people, like nobody wants to figure this stuff out on their own. And I think we all
Yeah.
know that that's not necessary. Like I have now a Google Doc that I send to literally every new person that comes in. I know they've got Chloe, I know they've got a social sponsor. And
Right.
I was like,
Right.
but like, here's the
Right.
import store. Here is the how you do, for us, like grab delivery. And like you really
Yes.
need to get on these Facebook groups, because in Vietnam, everyone is on Facebook and does things on Facebook, right? Like, so just those like
Yeah.
tiny cultural things,
Mhm.
and so yeah, I'm desperate to help people feel a little bit more comfortable, because it's just not necessary that they suffer, right?
Mhm.
And so I definitely feel that, and that we don't have to feel, I hope that when we're on the other side, like you're saying, we can take advantage of that, that we're like, oh, I don't want to be a burden. It's like, no, we're all used to doing this. Sometimes we're able
Mhm.
to give, and then sometimes we really need to say, yes, I will take that. Yes, thank you. Yes, I
Yes.
would love for you to show me around. Yes, please
Yes.
introduce me at this barbecue where I don't know anyone, right?
Yeah.
To accept that
Yeah.
generosity of the community. Um,
Mhm.
and I think it's easy for maybe especially for EFMs. Again, I'm thinking about the socialization of women to be caregivers. It can be really easy for us to take care of others and to volunteer to be social sponsors. Sometimes depends, um,
Mhm.
but it can be really hard for us to accept that care. And so I think as much as you're saying, Like, yes, give back when you can. I want to say that has to be balanced or you totally burn out, right? Like you
Yes.
need to be able to accept care just as much as you give care. And sometimes that plays out over a longer period of time.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key to accepting the help is being willing to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as EFMs, we don't come with a work title. Um, and so it's hard for us to enter a room and immediately be the vulnerable person that we are at the moment, because
Yeah.
you're like, geez, I don't want that to be the first impression of me.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that is your first experience
Mm-hmm.
in the new country that you're in. You are extremely vulnerable.
Yeah.
Um, and so, sort of letting go of being afraid of that first impression is part of accepting the help. I have a hard time with it myself. I'm like, oh no, I can do everything. I know everything. I'm a seasoned expat. But I have no idea. I really have no idea every time I move. So
Totally.
I want your file, even though I've been here for a year and a half, because I'm sure there's things that I don't know.
I'd be happy to send it to you. Totally would love to send that to you. Um, So before we get too far off of this topic, I
Yeah.
really want to jump back into this first impressions idea. And again, it relates so closely to the anxieties of coming into a new post, right? And I think that each time we work and we make these connections, and finally, after 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is, people start to understand who we are, that we are more complex, that we do have, multiple identities and these unique backgrounds, and for a lot of EFMs, a large variety of just life experience, that we've done a lot of really cool things throughout our lives. And that takes time to explain and get to know. And then we get to this new post and people say things like, well, what do you do? And it's like, because you don't want it, that first impression, you're in this state of like not knowing where anything is in your house, in your community, all of those things. And there's such a pressure to start creating those relationships maybe, or to not, to come off in a certain way. Um, and there's also societal pressures, like especially for, I talk with my clients about this a lot, for Americans to be successful, right? To have had like a job, or to be productive, or be contributing, or maybe even to have like hobbies or interesting things to say to that question, right? That we're
Mhm.
supposed to be um, on immediately and be able to share those things with people. How do you approach that
Well, I
difficult
think
moment?
yeah, I think I like to use the phrase, you have to flip the script. You have to change the script and change the words. Because you say, how are we supposed to do that? We're not supposed to do anything.
Mhm.
Um, there are no set molds for who you are coming into this life. And there's no set mold for who you are, period. And again, I remember talking to a friend about, well, how do people get to know you if they don't know your whole past and this illustrious career that I used to have and all the places I've traveled? And she's like, oh, I just try to be a good person now.
Mm.
You know, be the person that you want to be now to the
Mhm.
people that you're meeting. And that's who you are to them. It's not trying to catch them up to your past. It's not trying to
Yeah.
prove to them what you've done. It's how are you today with them? um, what are
Mm.
they looking to you for? And you don't have to give them anything. You don't owe anybody anything. You don't have to walk into this life being like, oh, I've got something to contribute, and I've got to eventually like help other people. I think it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to not fit in a mold. It's okay to just be you. I mean, I've gone to situations where people sit and want to be by themselves.
Mm,
And I say, oh, that's okay. I just won't talk to them because that'll make them feel uncomfortable,
mhm,
you know? Um, but if they approach me, I'll talk to them. That's who
mhm,
I am going to be for them
mhm,
um, that day. And so I think it's letting go. Um, it's that ego more on the philosophical sense than overconfident sort of definition of ego. The
right.
philosophical sense is more it's not about you in everybody's mind. Not,
Yeah.
I don't think people are judging you. I think they're trying to get to know you. And when you
Mhm,
are vulnerable, it's not pointing to a deficiency that you have. It's just being real. And in that way, you can connect, you
mhm,
know. Where you're at is where you can connect. Because you can't really be
totally.
anybody else, but
Mhm,
but who you're at right now. Um,
mhm.
and that sounds, pretty vague. But there is no mold.
Yeah, well, I talk about what you were saying earlier, that it's not all about you. I say that all the time. As humans, we do have a lot of ego. We do get very self-absorbed. We do, and we do have a lot of anxieties around how other people are perceiving us. But everyone has that, right? And so, what you're saying is like that there's so much. You weren't didn't use these words exactly, but there's strength and vulnerability, right? Like if you're the first person who's willing to kind of put that anxiety aside to acknowledge, like, here's just another person in front of me. And today I want to show up with myself and say, like, hi, like I'm here and here's a little bit about me and where I'm at today. And, kind of enter into this communication with this person of like, oh, well, how can, not how can I be helpful, but how can we communicate? How can we connect today? And to come at it from that angle rather than trying to monitor and create like a certain image of yourself that you want to give off. Because humans are also very good at like mirroring. And when you are able to bring that in, the other person is more likely to say, like, ooh, oh, wow. Yeah, I can just share with this person because they're just being real with me. They're just bringing themselves into this conversation. And I think that is a great way to flip the script, like you were saying, to not follow down the prescribed path of what this conversation, what we think it should be, right? Because there is no should, there are no rules for this stuff. But to just come in genuinely in the way we want to be there, because personally, I find that's where we get the conversations that are actually interesting. And we find the people that we can, we find our people so much faster if we just bring ourselves to the table. And maybe some people are like, oh my gosh, I like you. And then some people are like, I do not understand you. And this is not it. But that's okay because not everyone is our people, right?
Right. And your people may not be the physical people around you.
Mm-hmm.
I've uh, I mean, I talk confidently now and, I seem to have some advice, but, I've had really, really hard times
Mm-hmm.
socially. I still do. I can get very sad about it.
Yeah.
But the way that I've been able to find connection is really elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I pursued an online master's degree, and so I had my community of students or student colleagues and teachers
Mm-hmm.
that I thrived with every day. um, I've developed a passion for painting, and so it's a virtual community, but it's a community. It's a
Mm-hmm.
community that that feeds me, and we're
Mm-hmm.
there for each other. And I would love it if I could ever meet these people in person. Um, and so I've had periods where I've just accepted that my community is sort of out there somewhere, and I connect with them in my own way, and I don't put the pressure of having to have that physically
Mhm.
here.
Mhm.
And so, of course, the vulnerability there is, am I being perceived as an introvert? Am I antisocial? Am I being
Mm.
perceived as the not popular person? And I'm like,
Mm.
I don't care. When I wake up, I know who I'm excited to connect with, whether in person or virtual.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's letting go of how you think you may be judged. And the thing that helps with worrying about being judged is stop judging other people, and just having that compassion. And
Mm.
I think once you show that, you have it also for yourself, to not be so hard on yourself, to have to show up. I mean, engage, but you don't have to be anybody but
Mhm.
yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. So humans are judgers by nature, and we love to put things, people, everything into boxes. It's just kind of how our brain works. Like, oh, this is this, this is this. And we really struggle to let things sit outside of the box. Um, and especially that is well, it's an adaptive mechanism evolutionarily, but in expat life and foreign service life, people can really, if they're not watching themselves, lean really heavily into that coping skill, right? We can really get very judgmental because we're trying to figure things out quick.
Yes.
We don't have
Yes.
all this time to sort out who's who and do I like this person and are we friends or are we not? We don't have the same privilege as some people to live in the same community for decades on end and grow up, near the same people. And so if we get too caught up in those pressures, I think in expat foreign service communities, we are a little bit more judgmental maybe than the average population. Or there's a tendency right there. So what do you have any thoughts on kind of practical ways to observe or release or reduce that sense of judgment? Like, what kind of things do you tell yourself to remind yourself to stay open and to stay curious?
Is you never know what kind of day anybody's having.
Mm.
If they ask a question that shows their vulnerability, um, it may be something obvious to you and it's not to them, or maybe it's obvious to them, but it's a way for them to show vulnerability. Who knows? Just don't judge it. Take it for face value. It's what people
Mm.
are giving you. Don't
Mm.
second guess it,
I like
you
that
know.
idea that people are always giving. And how do we like accept those gifts from
Yeah.
other people?
Yeah.
Can we just take that
Right.
in and be with it
Mhm.
without?
And then my advice for the opposite is, if it's negative, give it another chance.
Mm.
Um, I say give it many chances. You go through so many phases
Mm.
in this transient life, once you land and you try to create that stability. A friend of mine uh, that I reached out to one time when I was feeling really low, she said, how long have you been there? I was like, oh, about 3 or 4 months. She's like, you're approaching the bottom you. And I was like, what's the bottom you? She's like, you get to post, you start up here and then you start going down, you get further down, and you're probably almost at the bottom. Maybe you're even at the bottom, but it then goes up.
Yeah.
Um, and and you're meeting people at various points
Uh-huh.
in their tour. Um, and then it changes again right before they're ready to leave, or right after they get their assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And so give people the flexibility of your thoughts that are fluid as their lives and your lives. You might be at the honeymoon stage of being here and you meet someone, who's down here. Don't convince them that this place is awesome. Just be like, oh, I'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, that is,
Enjoy it, but just
uh-huh.
be realistic about where people are at. You're not all going to fit.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that overlay of being able to receive when you first get to post, like all that care and people helping you out, right? And then as you kind of get your information saturated, and maybe all of the people who just had enough time to kind of help you out, but maybe not all of those are going to be your people, so maybe you don't see them all as often, right? Like it kind of starts to be like, oh, okay. And then all the excitement and beauty of a new place kind of gets steeped in with all of maybe the inconveniences or difficult parts of that post, right? And then you're just really struggling for a while because maybe you haven't been out of post for a while, or it's not time for an R&R or anything. And you do hit these kind of lows, and then as your time at post gets, you have less and less time, you're approaching the end, it's like, oh, it never fails, right? Like you get when as soon as it dawns on you that you're leaving a place, it's like, well, there are so many beautiful things. It's so beautiful here. Gosh, I hate to go. It's like, wait,
Right.
6 months ago you hated this
Yeah.
place.
Yeah.
And so like just accepting that we are on this journey, everyone's on this journey, and that we don't there's nowhere we're supposed to be on this journey, right? Like there's no ideal line. We're not supposed to love every moment of every post. That is not realistic. I talk a lot about in my practice of like, we're not trying to get to a happy place, we're trying to get to a realistic place, that people are able to evaluate things realistically, and sometimes they're happy about it and sometimes they're not, right? And so I really love what you were saying of just having this acceptance that people are going to be at different points, and we can just be where we are and they can be where they are, and we can be okay with that. We can accept that we're in different places.
Mhm. Yeah, I think so. I don't know if that's, work for the other people I've met, um, uh, where I'm like that myself, but that's how I try to at least approach my judgment,
Mm-hmm.
um, of people. And there's really good advice that someone gave to us, I think probably during A100 or during our first year at our first post was, in the Foreign Service, you're looking for three things. You're looking for a great job, uh, a great location, and great people at that location.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, you're never going to get all three. So that set our expectations, sort of
Mm,
really at a realistic level. You're going to either love your job and love the place, but they won't be your people. You love the people, you hate the place, or you don't like your job. You won't have all three. You make the best out of the one or two that you have. If you only
mm,
have one, hopefully it's only a 2-year tour, but you can move on and maybe get 2 out of 3 next time. And if
yeah.
you do have all three, don't tell anybody about it.
Yeah,
Because then it'll make bidding for everyone harder. No, I'm kidding. Um,
no,
and you know what? There
totally.
are no gems. There are no gems. You do not get to skirt around the difficulties.
Mm. Well, and there are no gems that are universal to every person, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
hear people talk about posts like, oh, this one's a hard post, or this one is no good, or the culture here is not great, at the actual within the consulate or embassy, right? And I always think like that. I'm sure that is not true, because the people change all the
Yeah.
time, and it is the people that make the place. I've always found that to be true, no matter where I lived. And that was one of the things you were saying. It's the job, the location, the people, and obviously my job deals with people, so I'm big into the people.
Yeah.
And I just think like, oh, that person or whoever they got that information from was at that post at a time with other people where they just weren't connecting,
Mhm.
and so it just kind of ruins their whole, you can, if you put too much weight on any one of those three, right, the job, location, or the people, you can get really down about it. And I think what you were saying about expectations is so on target, that we have to really have these kind of light and fluid and flexible expectations. We can try and hope and look in each of those areas. But if we're not getting our needs met, that it's really important that we find other ways to get our needs met. Maybe we find friends outside of the post community. Maybe we, connect back to digital communities or other places. Like you were saying, I love that phrase, like communities that feed you. And that is so important for us to take charge of that and to not give ourselves over and say, it's post responsibility to figure this out for me. It's your job to figure this out for you. It is your life. And that's what kind of one of the themes I've seen through our conversation is that do you take so much responsibility for maintaining your values and holding on to stability and checking in at each stage at post bidding season, and beyond to create and to reinvest in your values, that you don't depend on other people or outside circumstances to do that for you.
Yes to all of it. But at the end there, you kind of got me perplexed. Like, I don't depend on other people to do it for me, as if it's an unusual thing, because to me, no one else knows me to do it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I wake up every morning, what do I look forward to? Nobody that knows that.
Mm-hmm.
And if they knew that, I mean, maybe they can get it for me, but then it wouldn't really be genuine, would it? I don't know. I mean, I'm not questioning other people's needs to have more support around that. What I am questioning is if people are asking that of themselves in a very personal way. What
Mm-hmm.
does feed me? How do I react when my spouse tells me, oh, there's a consulate or an embassy gathering? Do you say, oh yay, I'm dying to get out, or you're like, oh god, no? And pay attention to that.
Mm-hmm.
Does it suck the wind out of you, or does it fuel you? If it sucks the wind out of you, don't go.
Mm-hmm.
There are no expectations. We're not back in the 1950s. Our spouse, don't have spouse performance on their reviews anymore. Thank God. I would have failed. And maybe it's perceived as being too fiercely individual, but gosh, if you're not happy, then your spouse isn't going to be happy, because there's so much guilt they carry about being in this life already, because it's their job that's
Mm-hmm.
putting us in these sort of miserable positions, and so they feel responsible. But I think you know if it doesn't feed you, don't do it. And when you start saying no, I think is when you might start finding what does feed you.
Yeah, I love what you said about for me in my head, I think about it in terms of like self-awareness, right? Like, do you know what feeds you? Have you thought about like what feels good for you and what it is that you need? Because you said, as you said, like no one else is going to do those things for you. And even if they do have some idea of what you need and they try to give it to you, it doesn't quite hit the same, right? It doesn't feel as genuine. And so I totally agree. This is another place where people can release those expectations and the shoulds and find what feeds them. And if it's not, say it's not at post gathering, then don't do that. I am a strong advocate for being very aware of how you're spending your time. Time is
Yeah.
our most valuable resource. And
Yeah.
I do not spend time on things that I do not enjoy doing. Well, that's not true. Of course, we have things that we really need to do, or, that are just kind of a condition of life. But wherever I have control over where I spend my time, I take it. If there is, sometimes, again, maybe some people perceive me as being harsh. If there's someone who really wants to hang out with me a lot, but I don't enjoy that person, I will share with them like I really don't have the time to invest in this relationship with you. Um, and it's just being honest and not leading this person on, and also giving me permission to invest in relationships that do feed me.
Yes. Yes. It's hard to say no because again, it's that fear of judgment.
Right.
Um, uh, but I don't think that we're being judged as harshly as we imagined. And one of my
Mhm.
favorite sayings, I went to a Jesuit university, so we studied a lot of philosophy as a requirement. And I always, love the Stoics because it's
Mm.
a way of life. And the most useful belief for me is, don't suffer imagined troubles.
Oh, don't suffer imagined troubles.
If
Love
you're
that.
imagining, if I say no, this person's going to think I'm unsocial, or they're going to think I'm, I don't know, an introvert, in a world where extroverts win more prizes, I guess. Um, or you're fearing judgments that may not be there,
Mm-hmm.
and you're suffering the imagined troubles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's making you unhappy.
Mm.
So flip the script and imagine that they think, oh, I understand. I'll give her or him the space today, but I hope they'll come back to me.
Mm.
Flip what's going on in your head, because we also are very naturally self-critical.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. I think that is, and it is a way, you were saying about the Stoics, it's a way of being, right? And I think that's what we're really talking about today, like the ways of being that help us move through this very complicated life. Because maybe we get very good at it, but it is hard to pick up and move your entire life every few years. And I never want anyone to forget that. I'm constantly reminding my clients, they're like, oh, I should be doing better at this. And like, oh, why am I struggling so much? Why am I so bored or so lonely? Or why? And it's like, because we do an impossible thing every few years. So like, can
yeah.
we like just be really nice to ourselves and accept the low times and the great times and just that we do have to stay, I think, more vigilant and to stay on our paths, right? Because our world kind of picks us up and moves us, and we have to stay mindful to get back on our paths, to be like, oh, I'm doing that thing again. I'm thinking other people are judging me. Like, I'm imagining the worst consequences here. Like, oh, I don't need to do that. Let me, it's a practice to continuously like get rid of that gunk, I think.
Yes, yes, yes. And a question that I was posed in a conversation, when things were getting overwhelming and I felt like I needed to be something or do a lot of things.
Mm,
They asked me a simple thing. They asked me, what if you didn't? What would happen? And I thought, nothing.
yeah.
It would still go on. That person would still have a life, or that function would still be fun, or, you know, so ask yourself, when there's so much anxiety about what you think you might be in and what you think you're supposed to do, just ask yourself, what if you didn't?
Mm-hmm.
Um, no one's really judging you, and please don't judge yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that helps me a lot when I start thinking, oh, I should do this, I should do that because people want this, people want that. And I'm like, well, what if I didn't? Um,
Yeah.
and it's all turned out okay. And this moving around is really, really hard. And whether you're happy in it or sad in it, it's an amazing thing that you're doing, which is why going back to the I'm just being amazing, whether it's in a puddle of tears, or, you know,
That's right.
on a joyful, adventure. It's
Hmm.
just, you're just being amazing. No one else lives this life, or not a lot of other people do.
Yeah, right. No one else is living your life, right?
Yes. Yes.
We're all on parallel paths, but they're all very unique. And the more we can lean into that uniqueness and delight in it and create, the path that we want, then I think that's a full life.
That's what
Um,
we hope.
yeah, that's what we hope for. We're not always
What
there,
we
right?
hope.
We're not
Mhm.
always. Sometimes that's not where we kind of wake up and we're like, where am I? What's going on? I thought I was supposed to love this life and delight in it. No,
No.
not supposed to do anything, right? Um,
No. No.
so before we, wrap up today, I just really want
Yeah.
to thank you so much for your time. I was saying like time is the thing that I am the most kind of like just gripping onto. And I am so grateful that you would spend this time with
Oh, you're
me.
welcome.
And I feel like there are so many just wonderful nuggets in this conversation. I can't wait to listen to it again and
Oh.
just kind of reflect more on that. Are there any final things you would like to share? Like if, who knows who's going to listen to this, but if you had a message, like something that was a hard earned lesson for you to share with the world, like what would you share?
Just be you. It's okay to be you wherever you're at. Just be you. It took me a long time to learn that. Um, that's really my best advice.
Mhm.
Be yourself.
Yeah.
Don't try to fit into any preconceived notions of shoulds. Um, just let yourself be and give yourself that space.
Yeah. So for anyone who may be listening to this and is on that journey, right? I think we're all on that journey of like finding out who we are and then being that person constantly. Like, just let this be a little reminder that it's not only okay to be you, but that is the best person to be for you.
Yeah.
That you're going to
Yeah.
find the most joy in that person. Um, I just want to point out to everyone because I can't let it go without being recognized. The Dee's background is her own watercolor piece, and she was talking about her. Oh my God, look at that beauty! Her quest and how she's gotten into painting, and that's been one iteration of her self journey. And I love that. I didn't even understand. I took her watercolor class, and I don't know why I'm talking to the viewer, but I'll just say, Dee, when I took your watercolor class, I was blown away at just this thing that you truly dove into, and you were so vulnerable and just brought all your sketchbooks and came at it with this attitude of like, look at where I started. And I didn't end in this beautiful flowery perfect like professional place, like I didn't start there, like it was a journey. And like just sharing that, I loved. I don't know, I don't have much to say other than like I love that, and thank you for
Oh,
sharing
that makes me happy. Thank you.
your painting journey in so many spaces, and that's one thing that you're doing now, right? That's pretty
Yeah.
fulfilling for you, that maybe
Yeah.
you never would
Super.
have thought you would be in this place.
Never.
But
Never.
so thanks so much. And with
You're
that, I
very
guess
welcome, Faye.
we will say goodbye.
Okay. Goodbye. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks again for joining me in this little experiment. I'm Dr. Faye. If you want to learn more about me, you can do so at drfaye.com. That's drfae.com. I've got all of the information you could ever want to know about me, my practice. I publish resources and other blogs from time to time. I have hundreds of free resources on there. So check it out and take what you like. If you want to get in touch with me, there's a form to do so there. If you want to follow Dee on Instagram or Facebook, you can definitely do that. I encourage you to do so. Get some beautiful art in your life. She is DW Harlow _art. That's DWHARLOW_art. I hope you have a wonderful day, night, evening, morning, wherever you're at. Enjoy it. And until next time, take care.